Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Otolo's Early Careers webinar. This is our session 3 out of 4, and we are delighted to be joined by more industry leaders sharing their expertise on, this week, interviewing, top tips on how you might be interviewed, and some thoughts on culture and assessing culture of where you're going to be working early, but also being super clear what you need and taking control during the interview process. I think our observation is there's just more ways than ever that you can meet employers and be interviewed. So helping you be ready for whatever the process throws at you is really our mission for the next 50 minutes or so. As ever, I'm delighted to be joined by my co-host, Craig Prentice, expert recruiter and industry legend. Good to have you here again, Craig. Week 3, how are you doing?
I'm good, James. Yourself?
Yeah, good. You're looking very sharp in your home office today.
Thank you very much. Wi-Fi is working.
Good stuff. So interviewing and culture, what's the big message? What do you want to get across today?
Gosh, I think very top line, I think treat the interviewing experience as part of the project. So I think last week we spoke about approaching your job search as a project. I think the interview should be treated as part of that experience and almost completing the homework. So look at it, treat it with care, don't rush in, and form that picture properly.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Well, let's get right into it then. So our guest this week, we have Trudy Parr, which we're delighted to have you back again, Trudy, from Molly's, part of the Soho House Group, and Luce Watson, as ever, our trusty marketing lead from Otolo. So welcome, both of you. Hope you are well and keeping good. How are you doing, Trudy? How's things?
Yeah, really good, thank you.
Excellent. Luce, you doing okay in your little box?
I'm good in my little selfie box.
Excellent, excellent. So, Trudy, would be great to get a bit of an intro. I think you've got some fab experience, but yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself, if you would.
Trudy Parr, I work for Molly's, which is a hospitality company. So we've got diners and motels. There's currently 2 open, and the third one's about to open in the new year from Manchester. But I look after all things people and culture. So training, development, retention, recruitment, and yeah, basically looking after all the people at Molly's.
Love it. So all this stuff, basically, all this stuff.
Yeah, all of it.
Our expert for the day. Perfect. And Luce, obviously, week 3 of chatting this stuff through. But for those who it's their first session, it'd be great to get a brief intro and give us what's your kind of big takeaway you think around interviewing and culture that you've got to get across today.
Sure. So Luce, marketing lead for Otolo. So this is our 3rd session of the Early Careers campaign, which we set up really as a passionate bunch of hospitality people that wanted to kind of give all of our top tips and insight, which has been really good. And today we're going to be talking about interviewing culture. I think for me, interviewing is a really kind of important process, and culture forms a big part of that. I'm sure Trudy will agree. But just making sure that actually you've done a lot of research around kind of the companies that you're applying for, even if it is like early on in your career, just making sure kind of, your personal values and getting that right fit from the get-go, I think is really important.
Yeah, lovely. Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, look, for our audience, as ever, please do send us in your questions. We've had some great questions from YouTube and LinkedIn watchers, people watching on Otolo. That's why we're here. Like what's on your mind? What's happening? So, Craig, why don't you kick us off with? So we've got a wonderful offer letter that, hey, it's time to come in for an interview. What should a candidate really be expecting to do next? How do you feel like the interview process is panning out these days in hospitality?
Gosh, a couple of questions there. So I think there's a lot of competition out there. I think in terms of candidates have choice at the moment. There's a lot of people vying for top talent within the industry. I think candidates have an amazing opportunity more than ever to not only choose the best option available to them, but take their time as well. And I don't mean keep an employer waiting, but to actually have a well-informed, well-rounded opinion, insights, idea, or confirmation of what that company is like. There's an awful lot of information where people can go once they've, or ideally whilst they're going through the interview process. I would like to think that people use it as part of their homework, but certainly by offer stage, I would hope that people will have checked websites, community boards, spoken to people that have worked within the businesses, etc., etc.
Yeah, nice. So truly, you're obviously hiring fast at Molly's, a kind of new growing brand. Share some of your experiences and realities. What's it like, I suppose, being a hiring manager out there interviewing day in, day out with both yourself and your team?
Yeah, I think it's hard in terms of there's an awful lot of challenges in the industry at the moment. So we need to make sure that we are as effective as possible. So our processes is etc. all as efficient as possible to get to the nitty gritty of the real talent that we want to get on board. So yeah, our experiences are that there is lots of processes change. So we're doing a lot more screenings. We're doing a lot more phone conversations prior to getting people in to try and get an understanding, and that also gives people an understanding of us, but also them as well. So I think there's a lot more touch points, but also more opportunity for culture to be seen from both sides earlier on in the process. And that's definitely changed recently, especially obviously.
Yeah.
But it's something that we now see as an advantage, and people that are applying should see that as an advantage as well, to get a really good indication before you really invest in where you're going.
Yeah, no, I love that. I've always made it really deliberate when I'm doing kind of my intro in an interview to say, look, this is as much for you as it is for me. It's absolutely your time to ask questions and make sure you're leaving this with a really strong sense of, is this the place for you? Is this the role for you? But it sounds like from what you're saying, that's not necessarily what all line managers put out there. So it's maybe not the expectations of all candidates. Maybe you could kind of share a few kind of tips and thoughts on, as a candidate, how do you step into that position if actually you're there trying to impress, I suppose. So how do you just kind of relax into it and make sure you really are asking smart questions that you don't kind of worry about missing out later?
I think echoing what Craig says, and it's all about the prep. Everything's about the prep, and you get more from it if you feel more relaxed about it, and by being more, you get more relaxed by prepping. And that's, I hope I'm not the only person that does that. I know I do prep within an inch of my life, but it is all about, look at it like, if we are reviewers as and that's a cultural thing now in the world. We review everything. Look at it. It's the biggest investment of, it's not a money investment, but it is the richest investment, because it's your future and your life. So if you can look at that like you would buy a house, car, etc., how much, really look at all those things and try and get an understanding of what the business is about before you go on the phone, you will feel much more attuned to it, and you'll feel more comfortable with asking those questions, because you'll move away from the normal questions, and you'll move into, okay, how does it affect me? What am I looking for? What are my values? And you'll be more confident asking those questions if you feel that way.
Yeah, really interesting. Really interesting. Luce, what's your experience as a candidate? Like, how much prep do you normally do before an interview? You strike me as somebody who might wing it, but maybe you could enlighten.
No, I'm actually not someone who wings. I actually spend quite a lot of time trying to find out about, like, culture and values is really important to me. And I've been, unfortunately, as probably most people have, in occasional roles that haven't been the right fit. And so for me, it's kind of top priority, probably personally, more kind of than salary or anything else. I want to love and be inspired by the people that I'm working with. So, it is all about kind of that culture and I suppose more what I call authentic and natural fit. So for me, it's usually doing a little bit of a LinkedIn stalk on hiring manager themselves, and kind of, to be fair, I've messaged people before on LinkedIn that have worked in companies to get, like, previous employees that perhaps have left, just to get a bit of a perspective. And obviously, roles aren't always right for everyone, and there will be bad experiences, so you do have to take some of that with a pinch of salt. But it comes back to kind of patterns, I suppose, and Glassdoor's a good one for this, kind of looking at salary reviews, interview kind of questions and reviews on Glassdoor, like culture and kind of company reviews in themselves as well. And I think, as I say, as much as people can kind of have bad experiences, and not every personality will always get on, and sometimes people clash, I think you can get an overall sense quite quickly from something like Glassdoor, in terms of, if it's 4 out of 5 and actually 80% of people are saying really positive things, and there's kind of a couple of things that are prevalent in every company, right? Because no company and no person is perfect. Then you start to build a bit of a kind of picture really of that culture, and then if you can kind of reach out to people that have worked in there, or mutual people that can kind of vouch for it, then you start to build a really solid picture of exactly whether it's the right fit or not.
Yeah, I love that. I think I guess I was worried when you guys were saying do your research. I was like, so many websites actually feel really generic and really samey, especially hotel websites, right? You've got kind of glamorous pictures. This is where you read about the dining room and the spa, or like, yeah. So my question is going to be, where do you go for that quite authentic view? But I like it. There's Glassdoor. There's kind of LinkedIn. I guess seeing how active people are on LinkedIn as well. Where else would you suggest, Trudy? I guess where else are you thinking about your employer brand, actually, where your kind of voice is showing up? And where else do you find candidates have typically kind of found some research and some tidbits?
I think it is. I'm echoing Lucy. I've done it before, and I've messaged people that have worked there. I've also looked at length of service for people that are on LinkedIn to try and understand what the average length of service. And I know certain roles turn over a little bit longer, but if you're really aligned with a company, you tend to stay there for longer. Also, social media. I know it can be. You can get some great marketing people like Lucy, but that can make the front end look awesome. But you really look at what the messaging is. Is it surrounding the people? Is it all very staged? Is it what are the benefits? If you look at some of the benefits of some of the organization, what are they centered around, and how do they adapt those benefits? And are they aligned with what you would find, something that is powerful for you? So I think there's lots of little clues that you can get from a lot of different areas, but yeah, be very careful not to fall in the trap that it's just because people can make things look awesome, but it's real stories, isn't it? And there are real people that you can get information from quite easily, but understand what is the right information to listen to if you get enough of it.
Yeah.
I think a good one as well. I think a lot of people have kind of done this since COVID, and again, like, no one's perfect, and COVID was unknown to a lot of us, but obviously there are companies that have treated people well through COVID, and there are companies that have done it really badly. And I think like an interesting one, I think, for interviewing is, how did you treat your people during COVID? Like, did they go on furlough? What, like, to your point, Trudy, like, were there benefits? Did you put on kind of well-being initiatives? Like, what did you do? Did you put your people first, or did you put the company first? I think you can kind of tell a lot by asking the right questions in that sense as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And coming back to values, Luce, if for example, if D&I is really important to you personally, or well-being piece, you've only got to ask those key questions, and you can be quite clever about it and ask them actually, what their activities behind the scenes. A lot of people put a badge, don't they, on their websites or their branding. And I think sometimes you've just got to take a little scratch and find out actually what's underneath by asking those questions.
Yeah, I guess that puts pressure on you, Trudy, to make sure, I guess, looking at it from the employer's point of view, making sure your line managers feel actually really confident answering those kind of questions as well, right? What kind of work do you do internally to make sure that those interviews are productive places for both you as an employer and for the candidate, and that you can do the best as an employer to, I suppose, do a fair representation of some of your values?
Yeah, so there are structure, policies, processes, but they're brought to life. They shouldn't just be something that sits in a drawer or sits on a file on a computer. They should be lived and breathed. And you're right, values need to feed in through that interview process. So how we do it, how we appear from the job ad through to how we meet and greet people, what how they're made to feel when they come through the door, how all the teams speak to them when they come through the door, and the contact elements, not just interview, post interview, but all the communication, the documents that go out as well that all makes you feel like you are looked after, you are thought through, you belong. If you have structure and it's also professional throughout, that gives you a good insight. You can be an amazingly cultural brand that really looks after their people, but you've got to have those structural bits behind the scenes that support all of the network. And everybody needs to understand the importance of those and how that feels to a person coming through a business.
Yeah, very nice.
I like that observation point, actually. That's a really key one, because normally if I'm working with a candidate, I suggest they obviously visit the hotel or the club or whatever beforehand. It's very easy to do that and look at the experience from a guest perspective. I think if you sit and observe and you're very good at it, or you're very careful and calculating with it, you can actually see the interactions between the staff. You can actually see, the restaurant manager or the floor staff. You can see from body language. You can see from the little interactions that they have. You can pick up a lot from that, I think.
Yeah.
I think from assessing candidates as well, I always ask the reception, how is that experience for you? So how they interact with your team from coming in through the car park through to the team as well. It's really important, because you want everybody to feel that they connect to people, that they're interested in people, that they like, and that's our way, so we wouldn't want somebody to come into the business, and although I know nervous when often nervous when you're coming for an interview, but generally being nice, very being open, but all those kind of things, it work, the values sort of pull both ways, don't they?
Yeah. Just sticking to the basics, what are some top tips on calming people's nerves? Because I think we're saying as quickly as possible, you want a really natural conversation where both sides can really say what they want and what they expect and how they can support and help each other grow. How do you encourage people to act naturally and reduce nerves? Luce, I don't know if you've got some thoughts on this one.
I've kind of done it, I suppose, from a candidate perspective. I've always tried to treat it as a two-way conversation. Like, it obviously, like when you're early on in your career, is really nerve-wracking. I think as you kind of go through your career and you get a bit more senior, you become a bit more relaxed about it being the right fit and the right culture and the right people. But you think it's very easy to work yourself up. So actually just kind of treating it as like, we're all human beings at the end of the day, right? And like, as much as it's right, the right culture, it is just a job you're applying to. It's not life or death. So it's either right or it's not right for you. And I think if you kind of take that into perspective and actually just you need to be professional, not treat it as like it's someone like your mate that you're talking to, but it should be a fairly open, kind of honest, authentic conversation. You should feel like comfortable enough, to ask questions that might be a bit tricky for some employers, right? Like, if you want to ask the questions about the kind of benefits, the well-being, what previous staff would say, it is that two-way conversation. As much as it's about getting hired, it's very much about it being the right fit for you as well, because nobody wants to waste time. I think particularly in this day and age, it's very easy to kind of jump from job to job, and I think COVID kind of hasn't helped that. But people like to treat these point. People like to feel kind of wanted, welcome, settled. So actually, if you go through that process and you do it properly, then the results are way more rewarding, right? You could apply to 20 different jobs, not do the research, and you're going to have bad interview experience after bad interview experience. You apply to kind of, Craig said it before, use it as a project, 2 or 3, do your due diligence, really kind of delve into the companies, the ethos, the values, the role itself, and be aligned on that. And then actually that whole interview process becomes quite natural and easy. And normally, right, you walk away from an interview and you feel it within yourself. And we've all probably been there at points, right? You kind of walk away and you know that you've got the job because it's been such a natural kind of open, honest conversation. I think particularly when you're passionate about an industry or a role as well. Like, I think me and Craig have said it before, like it's really easy to see from both sides when someone's not being authentic about it. And it goes back to the day old kind of, if you're not passionate about it, like, why are you applying? Obviously there are many reasons why people apply for jobs, but you should always try and kind of aim, to be somewhere where it doesn't feel like work, right? We all love people. That's why we work in hospitality, and people work in different industries for those same reasons.
Yeah.
I think also from a hiring manager's point of view, that you do lots of interviews. You genuinely, as a human, want people to do well. Well, I do. So to sort of relax, I'm rooting for you. That's, I've got your CV in front of you, and I want this to go well, and I want to find someone really great. I'm not here waiting for it to go horribly wrong. So please know that. And I think I speak for the majority of the industry to say that that's the case. It's that whole making people feel at ease, because it is, we know, I've been on the flip side, we've all been on the flip side, then it is a nerve-wracking thing, but we do genuinely want you to do well. Yeah.
Do you think, Craig, you see a lot of employers, is there still a bit of a bad cop mentality sometimes for interviewing? Is that either because the interviewer is just in that kind of a mood, or because they genuinely think that's a good way to test a candidate. Are there still interviewers still trying to catch people out or give them a hard time, or actually do you feel like candidates should just be like, look, 99% of the time you're going to be chatting to someone like Trudy who's just wants you to do well, and either way you've met someone new who's passionate about hospitality? Like, what's your experience to kind of help candidates with that?
I think as an industry generally, I think there's definitely a shift. I think there's definitely a shift in employers realizing that there needs to be a shift, and that people are looking for more than just a job and more than just a salary. More and more I hear the word belonging, authenticity comes up a lot from the client side. So I think those will mean that there will be an ongoing shift. I do think that some people are still stuck in a certain way of thinking, and perhaps your more traditional employers, as opposed to the more lifestyle end of the market, probably, if that's quite a generalization. But I do think there is that. There's certainly a lot of competency interviewing still around, which I personally am not a big fan of. For me, a lot of the time I've read the CV, but I'll put it to one side. Sometimes I even turn it over because I really want to get to know that person. And for me, it's far more about the attitude and the heart of the person, and that passion and fire that they have for the role. But generally speaking, I think that there is a shift,
Yeah, very interesting. As part of people's preparations, should they be preparing for certain questions? Should you be jotting down your bullet points on where you want to be in 5 years' time, and what you do if you walked into a room and there's a penguin in the corner, and all these kind of just anything that could kind of catch you out? I guess, Trudy, where's your head at? Because I guess you must have certain questions you're going to ask. Do you like people to be able to actually go, I've got something here that I've really thought about, or would you prefer if they just offered it off the cuff?
Yeah, I think I do like a natural conversation, but there is structure to be able to assess people, in a fair and reasonable way. So I would say make sure you've really looked at that job description, and make sure you've got examples against that job description. What does that mean to you? If you were asked a question about that, how can you put that into a situational or task-based scenario? And how do you bring your experience to life? Because I've seen some fantastic CVs, and you can also get support making your CV very fantastic, but lifting it off the page in that interview. You've got to really think about, what do you want to get across to that employer about how amazing you are, and what benefits you bring to that business. So it's those three. Go in with three things that, even though you've looked at the job description and you've understood. There's going to be bits about culture. You'll want to know culture as well as they do. But how do you bring those three things straight across so they remember them about you, and how that makes you different? But yeah, there'll always be situational or task-based questions, I should imagine, of some sort, in order for you to be able to really display your knowledge.
Yeah. Well, it feels like it would be remiss of us not to be like, let's bash out some of our favorite interview questions then, so people can be prepared. Trudy, what have been some of your what questions are you typically going to ask? And then Luce, Craig, I'll come to you guys. Well, let's build up our top 10 interview questions for people, so you'd be like, I better be ready for this.
I think it's more about tell me about a time when you showed, depending on what role it was. If I'm interviewing for a sales manager, it would be talk me through how you convince that client to get to come and use your hotel or your business. They're very plain, it's going to be your task and your part of your life. I don't ask what your favorite cheese is or anything random like that. It's just it is more about how that can be put into practice, really. It's quite common.
Yeah. I mean, it's a Wensleydale, but I hear you. So for you, it's very much like questions of can you do the job. It's really functional questions.
Yeah, but I do also like to. I mean, there are things like what do you do? How do people describe you? Those awkward questions, which I hate, is What's your weakness, because that can always be, that's always feels like it's being overanalyzed, which you should just say what you feel like you need more help with, and I think you be quite confident with that. But yeah, they are quite.
I'm gonna call you up on that one, Trudy, because that's a tough one. Because,
it is a tough one.
Because the hiring manager will no doubt chat to other people, be like, well, what are Trudy's development areas? Well, actually, she told me her 3 development areas. They are this. Well, now we're worried about that. Sounds like she's not very organized. Sounds like she's not very good under pressure. So
you've got to be prepared.
There is a game, right? There is a bit of a game. We're all saying be authentic, but is it also fair to say if you just turn up and be like, I'm so disorganized and I'm often late, you're like, well,
I think you've got to look at the job that you're going for, and your weaknesses really. I mean, if you're right for that job, your weaknesses won't be if you're relating to the tasks or the expectations of that role. But you do need to spin a positive as well. And I think that's a question you should practice and be comfortable with before you're going, because someone will ask you it somewhere.
I've never ever got that question right. I'm pretty sure I've never got a job offer on any time I was ever asked that question.
I haven't got any.
I'm a bit too much of a perfectionist, actually.
I've used that.
Yeah, that's like how not to answer that question. Craig, what do you see? Give us some of your. These are good. Give us some of your favourites, or let's say most effective at drawing out good fits.
I think it's more about diving deep on the work-life balance, which is coming a lot at the moment. And for me, that's very broad. So it's immediately asking, what does that mean to you? Because it can mean so much to so many different people, as well as the whole culture question as well. That means so much to so many different people. So I think it's diving deep on that and asking people to explain what that means. I also think that one of my other key questions, normally, bearing in mind the level that I tend to recruit at, is more about what are your 3 top tick boxes? What are your must-haves for your next role? And then I guess for people that aren't proactively looking, who are probably, only going to move for an amazing opportunity because it ticks their 3 boxes, what will it take you to move your role? And I think it's having that understanding and that insight for somebody who is perfectly happy in their job, keeping an eye open maybe, but will move for that exciting role. And there's lots out there. I think we said last week, didn't we, about people keeping eyes open and how important that is.
Yeah. And that feels like that's a great line manager question, right? Because that's the perfect answer to say, I only want an authentic answer, right? If it turns out 2 weeks later you were trying to say the right thing, well, actually, this is, and then it turns out you gave the wrong salary, you gave the wrong impression on work-life balance, you gave the wrong impression on responsibilities, you'll really kick yourself. So a great line manager question, because it really is saying, let's be really honest with each other, right? We are both here to kind of make something good happen.
Absolutely.
Luce, what are some of your favourite questions, or what do you ask, or what have you been asked that you think you nailed?
Oh, I've seen some random ones which have been quite funny that put people on the spot. But I think some of my favourite ones are like, what do you dislike about your current role? I think that's usually quite telling in terms of kind of why somebody wants to move and what they're looking for going forward. And I think that can kind of open up a lot of doors around kind of actual hard likes and dislikes really within a role. There might be things in the job description that actually they answer, and then you're like, oh, that doesn't quite marry up with the job description. Trudy's smiling. She's clearly been there before. Goes back to that authentic piece. And then I just think other ones, around like similar to Craig, like work-life balance, just making sure it's that right cultural fit. I usually like to throw in sort of a behavioural-led question. So, would you submit a project on time that's good enough, or would you submit a project that's late and perfect, just to kind of get an understanding of kind of how people work? I think, again, that can be quite telling, and I think a lot of people do those kind of behavioural scenario questions now as well.
One of my clients at the moment, just pop it out there, not a question of mine, but one of my clients at the moment, his favourite question is, so I turn up to your house at 7 o'clock at night with £500. What are we going to do?
Yeah. Should candidates prepare for questions like that?
Not at Molly's.
Yeah. Okay.
What are your thoughts on that?
We'll go straight to. Yeah, we'll go straight to Molly's. We'll go straight to Molly's. No, really, really good. And what about like future questions? What do you want to do in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Are those still of a fashion, and should candidates be prepping for that? And I suppose, what are some sensible ways to think about your answer for that? Trudy, I guess you've been doing a lot of interviews recently. Does this one come up at Molly's?
Yeah, no, not a fan generally. It's good to try and get an understanding of expectation of the current role, but also expectations of where that person sees that role going or sees that evolve. I think it's honest conversations with regards to that. But actually, I think the world is, I think with what we've been through, I think the world has changed so much. I don't know what I'm doing in 5 years' time, and I think I understand. And how much of that do you want to share at that stage as well? I think that there's an element of that, but also it is. I'm not sure what you get from it. I don't know in terms of it phrased in that way. I'm not sure how much both parties would get from it, apart from a little bit of awkwardness. It's quite an old framed question, isn't it?
Yeah, but I suppose recognise, Craig, there still is quite a traditional mindset in pockets of the industry. So it's not impossible. You could be going to work for a great property or a great brand, and you may have someone who they fall back on those kind of questions.
Yeah, that question puts a lot of pressure on people, right? In terms of, like truly, as you say, like particularly as people have come through this, coming up to 2 years now, we've got to be so careful. I mean, it's very telling, isn't it? If an interview is full of questions like that, because if you are a little bit perhaps timid or shy and less career driven, probably not for you.
Yeah, really interesting. But I guess no harm in having an answer prepped, even if it's along those lines, right? It's been a crazy 2 years, and I know what I'm really enjoying right now. I know what I'm really passionate about. I'd be interested to see how it evolves, but
yeah,
looks like this place has got lots of options. So again, nailed it. So we talked a lot about kind of that's your kind of line manager employer questions. We've got a great question here about what about candidates. So what do we think about this section at the end of the interview? What are your expectations, Trudy, around candidate questions? Again, I know there's probably no perfect answer, but maybe just give some examples of kind of the kind of questions that you would expect to see that would start to tick some of the, I suppose to kind of complete some of the picture around culture, around fit, perhaps.
Yeah. So I love questions. I think that just shows the interest level of the candidate as well. And I know that sometimes when you're having lots of natural conversations, some of the questions are covered off. But it's also, I think it really does help somebody recruiting to understand where that person's, interest level is. But culturally, like, how does the company recognise its staff? How do managers set staff goals and expectations in this company? How do I fit into that? But also ask questions like, what's your favourite part of the job? Don't be cheeky. Go, what do you like about it? And often people can naturally say that if they feel it and they, it comes across, and you can really start to read those questions. And what do you find challenging about the job? They're really good insights into how somebody feels that business is treating them in terms of their values.
Yeah, and how important, Trudy, is that section of the interview? Do you feel like, a decision's made or broken there, or do you feel like actually we can already be a little bit biased, perhaps, with everything we've chatted through, and it's either a tick box exercise or it's a lovely bit of friendly conversation?
Yeah, I think it's definitely enhanced. It enhances your opinion. It gives you more, because there is, in terms of being fair and reasonable, etc. throughout, there is a structure, there's a scoring mechanism, all of those kind of things. So there is, but this bit is really free. It's the candidate's chance to really, hopefully they would have been able to ask questions all the way through, but it's a chance to really bring your mark to it. So I think it's really important. I think I see that as the most important part of it, really.
Yeah, perfect. And Craig, what are your kind of recommendations around questions that candidates ask? Does it ever come back to you from line managers like, Craig, you would not believe what they asked?
How did I do? That's the
Is that okay? Are you allowed to ask, how did I do?
Ooh, I don't think so. That's like, yeah. Especially the only question you ask.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like I think questions like that are no. I think asking really obvious questions. I know that's a bit of a general one, but asking really general questions, or even worse, stuff that's been covered off pre-interview in the JD, salary or whatever.
If it's in the description.
That's
definitely. Or like where are your venues? Where are your hotels? You're like, oh, okay, like that big section of our website you could have looked at.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think also another part of like the interview, the whole interview process is how long it's taken. You know, candidate can gauge a lot about the company from, generally speaking, about a company from the actual interview experience. So the communication, the initial contact, the time length, the time between stages, how many stages. You know, I still hear of 6 stages sometimes, and I'm like, you know, pretty horrendous. Trudy, how many do you have?
Depending on the role, more senior roles,
3.
Is there a, talk of interview stages, is there an argument that it's a good way to check fit across peer groups, for example? Like you may actually, if you're going to be working across, you know, a leadership group, or if you're going to be working in a tight team, is it okay that you'd say, actually, you know, a few people need to meet this person? I guess maybe you're signaling at that point, this isn't a strong interview, you know, your sessions with the boss and decision makers have gone well, but we just like to check for fit? Or is that just a no-no? Because I've definitely had 6+ interviews, but in a way I was just like, oh wow, they're really checking that it must be a tight team, I suppose.
I've had it before where my 3rd stage interview personally was a dinner with the senior team, and that was, you know, you felt like it was, you know, you were being signed off basically by them, and it is your chance to be relaxed and I actually think there's quite a lot of benefit for that, in terms of different layers, but that kind of stage you're pretty much there, if that makes sense.
I can imagine that being incredibly nerve-wracking, and I can imagine that I would probably get that very wrong, but that's fine. No, all good. So we've got a great question coming. I do want to talk about types of interviews, actually. I hadn't thought about the dinner, but while we're doing this, what is your favourite question that's ever been asked by a candidate? Luce, I'll start with you, and then Trudy, Craig. I'd love to kind of hear this one from Rebecca.
Oh, that's a difficult one.
That is difficult.
That's a difficult one. I think for me, again, like from a personal perspective, it comes down to value. So like if someone comes and asks about people, and what the team is like and how they work together and how they collaborate, like for me, that's a huge tick box. I think particularly if you've got like a collaborative, quite agile team, like I want to be able to gauge from an interview someone that's going to roll their hands, you know, sleeves up and get dirty and is not kind of worried about getting stuck in. It's funny when I used to work in events, one of the questions that used to get asked a lot, and it's probably a bit dated now, but, you know, like if you were at an event, when you were running an event or a producing event, you know, would you be happy to go and clean the toilets? And I think we've kind of touched on it before, Craig, isn't it? Like there's certain things, body language, kind of the tone in which people answer, like it's quite telling. And I think particularly for hospitality, like you want people that are, like, to Trudy's point, like really passionate about people. Like you want each other to do well. You want to work for a company that wants to do well and has a good mission, and vice versa. So yeah, for me, it's more people-led questions than anything else.
Yeah, nice. Trudy, any thoughts?
No, just genuinely interesting. You know, in terms of they're interested in really getting to the bottom of the business. You know, those questions that are a little bit, oh, I have to think to answer that question, or I hadn't thought that was gonna. I didn't think that was going to come out. I think that I like that. I like people thinking a little bit outside of the norm, and what's important to them.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that tags on to what I was going to say about. There's nothing worse when you're interviewing someone and then you get to the end of the interview and you say, "Have you got any questions?" And they say, "No, you've answered them all." It's almost like you need that extra special question or three to stand out and make the interviewer remember you.
Yeah, just a slight lack of curiosity and inquisitiveness. I think it's really interesting. You all answered that in such a nice way. I'd interpreted this question as like, give us some really funny stories, but you all just got, actually, this is the really, really wholesome one. I remember I was working in a startup, and it was kind of really low margin, working really hard all hours. And someone, I think, thought we were like a tech startup. It was like, do you do free lunches? I was like, you've obviously not read our website. And here we are in like a converted warehouse in Bermondsey with like rat poison down, like people just running all over the place. Does this look like the kind of place where we will just stop for an hour for lunch and we just put on this spread for everyone? I was like, no, it's really like, bring your own lunch, or there's a couple of cafes around. This is it. If you don't like it here, there's not some secret room with glass walls that we can think of. Anyway, all good, but you're all been very polite. So I would love us to spend some time on the types of interviews, because I'm sure the world has changed in the last 2 years, and now we're probably going to be in this kind of blended way of learning. Like, are we meeting back in the real world now, one-to-one or in groups? Are we meeting online? Is it still phone calls? So let's get into what kind of interviews people might expect. Maybe Trudy, you could just give us life at Molly's and Soho House. What kind of interviews are you putting people through? And what might be some kind of top tips for each?
So you can expect initial phone interviews, general conversations to just try and lift your CV, and to gauge personality, to gauge interest, to try and evoke some conversation between and bring you to life in terms of in front of a recruiter. Also, initial screening interviews, which are either Zoom, Teams, or something very similar. So to try and again build a bigger picture. They're usually longer. They're usually about an hour long, an hour, whereas a conversation would be kind of 20 minutes, 25 minutes maximum. And then it depending on how successful you are, then we move to face-to-face. And depending on the role, it could be, and depending on, line managers generally do the interviews for their teams because they know what they're looking for. They understand. But I would support on the initial screening interviews. So you might meet several different people along the way, but that will all be communicated through. But also in terms of communication, you will understand whether you are, how that process is going to be. So you feel comfortable with it. So you can understand whether you will be expected to do a presentation stage, or you'll be expected to, an initial screening, or there'll be a two-stage interview or a three-stage interview. So it's very much a communicative approach, but could take various medium forms.
Yeah. I really like your point about there's a lot of signaling that needs to happen, isn't there? It's just like, look, this is a first call. If that goes well, then there's a job. Really, it's a bit like we do when we're teaching or something, just letting people know what that's.
It's reassurance, isn't it? Reassurance, but also there's enough anxiety, I think, or can cause concern about when you're applying for jobs and you don't hear back, or you're ghosted, or you're all those kind of things. So communication is key. Don't get me wrong, please. If there isn't that, then you should get in touch. You should say, hi, just can I just make sure that this is happening? Yeah. That shouldn't happen. But don't be frightened of doing that, just to feel like you're in control of that situation as well.
Yeah, pretty good question to ask at the end of an interview. In fact, if you run out, Craig, no one's offered it.
What's the next step?
A question I have, as Trudy absolutely put in my mind, when someone says, walk me through your CV or tell me about your experience, what is the right thing to do? Like, because some people can talk for hours. You go, well, that's 29 minutes, my 30-minute interview. Some people are like, well, I started work with a newspaper around at 11. Some people are just like, my CV's in front of you. Craig, what's best practice? If someone says, talk me through your CV, share your experience with me, what are you really looking for? And how should someone respond in a way that makes you think, yeah, you understood what I needed without me just reading a CV?
I think it's personally a review, like a summary review, rather than back in the day I did this. I think, unfortunately, a lot of people expect to walk through the CV. So even when I have said to people, "Oh, can you give me a bit of a snapshot to your career, in 5 minutes?" They still jump in and go, "I left university," and they still walk through it, because I think there's still an expectation for people to do that. So I think it's about the interviewer clarifying what that is. So can you give me a 5-minute summary of your career to date, or your career journey, and where you're at? I like to personally get a bit of a snapshot as to where they're at the moment, and then kind of work backwards, again in summary format.
Yeah, nice. And Trudy, what do you see? I love your point, Craig. The employer should get it right, but if they don't quite ask it quite so succinctly, what do you recommend people do? Is 5 minutes about right? Do you spend a bit more time on the current role? Like, I think I've always struggled with this question.
Yeah, I think also just keep in mind the job you're going for and how your experience meets that job. So to lift that piece up. So I've been in operational roles, sales roles, people role. So it's really I could talk for 15 years. It's not going to be pretty. So you have to really lift the bits up that person. You're there to solve their problem. They have got a problem. There's a gap, and you're there to fill it. So it's about taking your CV and filling that gap and showing them from your experience how you plug that gap. So that's it. You're there to solve their problem. So that's how you bring your experience in.
Got it. So that is another prepare, right? Prepare. You will probably be asked that question. Make sure you have drawn out those 3 or 4 projects, examples on your CV that that you can really nail it. Yeah. Luce, what are your thoughts on this? Because you've had a really nice varied career as well, and I guess that's the real strength for this particular question. But do you sometimes feel pressure to summarize it all when you get that question?
I mean, it's really quite hard sometimes to summarize everything I've kind of done in like 5 or 10 minutes. So I think, like, similar to Trudy, it has to be quite relevant to the role. I think there's little bits, right? Like, if you've done particular kind of passion projects and stuff that you're really proud of, or that have got amazing results and aren't relevant to the job description, I still think it's important to kind of pull those through. Like, if you've got something that you're like, actually, look, I did this and I'd never done it before, and this was an amazing achievement for me, I think those bits are fine. But I think as you start to kind of rack up experience, some of it's not always relevant. So I think, to Craig's point, like, you don't want to be sitting there for kind of 20 minutes going through your kind of whole career, walking through university. So it's very good to just kind of summarize quickly kind of those bits that aren't relevant, and spend much more time focusing on kind of roles that are. And I think sometimes it's easy to forget as well, like, your last role might not have been the most like relevant role, right? Like, Trudy, probably one of these for you recently. Like, you've been kind of in ops, and then you're swapping to people, but actually you haven't worked in kind of a people function for a while. But then you've got to kind of go back. But then you're still going to need to touch on kind of the more relevant experience, because obviously employers are kind of looking at why you want to leave your current role and kind of what you're doing. So it is relevant, but you kind of need to learn to balance that out, I think.
Yeah, makes sense. So I want to come back to these different types of interviews, and that was super helpful, Trudy, kind of getting a sense where you're at. We're hearing a lot more about these, I don't know what you'd call them, almost like open days. I know a lot of hotels, especially big city hotels now, are having days where they open the doors for a whole range of candidates, really, I suppose, trying to sell that building, but also sell the different opportunities there are in hospitality, meeting more of the team. It's quite efficient. Trudy, talk us through a bit about this. What should a candidate's expectations be? Why are you doing this as employers? Like, how can, I guess, a candidate make sure that goes their way versus maybe one-on-one time, which is a little bit more planned?
Yeah, I think again, it's prep. Understand what the business is. Even looking at the key people in that business, because they'll probably be there during that that open day, and what they do. But think about how you want to come across, and how you want to align yourself to that brand, if that's what you want to do. So again, touch points, conversations, everybody will be looking for how you interact with those people on those days. So but also get a list and get and some key points of what you want to get out of it, key questions you want to ask, and take your CV as well. Take a copy of the CV with you, because it's always good to leave that with somebody on the day as well. But yeah, be prepared of what you want to get out of that experience and how you want to align yourself with that brand, and think about your journey through that business on that day.
Yeah, makes sense. And Luce, in the world of kind of obviously kind of events and restaurants, and you come from that world as well. What are some of your expectations these days? You think about what candidates should be seeing when they apply and are getting their interviews.
I think it again goes back to people, kind of how I think people engage on both sides. So, I would expect a candidate to kind of walk into an open day and be friendly and open and chatty with everyone. Obviously, working in hospitality, you can't kind of shy away from people. You're going to have to kind of work with people directly in every capacity. So, having a bit of an edge. I think there's a fine line between confidence and kind of cocky. And I think sometimes people can kind of, we've probably all seen it. Like you get kind of, people get nervous. They balls in, and then it's kind of like they trample on everyone else. I think you kind of have to bear that in mind when you are in a group environment, because then you're not getting that one-to-one time. So you kind of want to do enough to stand out, but you've got to remember that this is an industry and these businesses are about people. So you're being watched on how you treat others, and how you respect others. So that kind of level of self-awareness needs to come in. And again, on the flip, right? Like I've kind of seen it. A terrible example of a GM once that like came straight into a role at a previous hospitality outlet I worked in, was new in role and didn't even introduce himself to the team. He just went straight in with kind of being quite rude and quite standoffish, and it didn't make the group look very good. So I think yes, it's kind of that the self-awareness really level on kind of both sides.
Nice, really good. So Connor's got a few minutes left. What have we missed? What have we not spoken about so far in terms of kind of interviewing tips and thoughts of the moment, and of course, kind of culture and finding the space for you? Craig, go on, Lucy.
I was just going to say number of rounds. I think like it's interesting, isn't it? Because obviously everyone kind of depends on the role and depends on the company. Everyone kind of does it differently. But I think like Craig, Trudy, do you think it's pretty standard now on a kind of second round interview that some sort of project presentation has to be kind of presented back? How do you guys kind of work that, Trudy from a Molly's perspective, Craig from
it depends. Yeah, it depends on the role. So yeah, sales roles, etc. Definitely, you've got a presentation to do, and some research to bring to the table. Other senior roles may just involve very different people in the business. So that if we're recruiting for senior roles, the MD and then board would then do other interviews as well. So depending on where we are with that, but also in terms of team fit, as we grow and as we develop our team, there will be possibly more people involved in a panel or two people, for example. Sorry.
What about your early careers people? Do you still get them to kind of run on trial shifts and see how they interact on the floor with other members of staff? Do you still kind of run those?
Yeah, trial shifts all the way. For sure.
What are you looking for on a trial shift? Give us your top tips.
I think interaction, and more personality, culture, but also how because we can train within an inch of our lives. There's not you don't have to come fully ready to do everything. That's not what life's about. You need to come to a business and we need to teach you skills and all those kind of things. So just very much how the interaction is with the team, and how the interaction is with customers, how much energy you have, all those kind of things, and how you are open to learning as well, and how you take conversations from more senior people that you are having to work with,
Yeah, I love it. So what else we missed? Craig, what's on your mind?
a lot.
Perfect. No, sounds good. Okay, then final round robin then. What is your big takeaway from this? What would you say to any participant who is about to sit down with you or about to sit down on a job that they're really passionate about, or given preparation might be the answer, is about to prepare for a job they're about to sit down with? What are your must-dos? Luce, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So I think for me, obviously going back to that job spec, just making sure you're not going to tick every box, and I think that's fine as long as you're kind of going prepared and prepared to answer the questions where you don't tick all the boxes, and I think that's fine. And I think there's strength in that, right? Admitting kind of where not saying it as a weakness, but kind of where you might need some additional support or training. And like Trudy says, no one's kind of perfect or looking for kind of a perfect person to come in, and training can be given. So it is very much around kind of attitude. Simple stuff: turning up on time, being in the right dress code. So that sounds simple, but you kind of see it all the time where people kind of come in late or not dressed appropriately. Having questions prepared in advance, kind of having done some kind of cultural kind of due diligence, I guess, and kind of checks in advance, whether that's Glassdoor or LinkedIn. Having a Google, I think sometimes is a good one as well, just to kind of see if there's any kind of company interviews or hiring managers on interviews where they've kind of done some press bits before. I think that can always be quite telling. And then just going and being really authentic. I think it's really hard. I think particularly if you're applying to kind of multiple jobs at any one time. Craig's kind of touched on it multiple times across these calls, but really kind of keeping a track of what you're applying to and just making sure that actually you are really passionate about it. So if you are, it comes across really natural and authentic. So again, sounds really simple, but actually, if you are really passionate about it, then that's the industry or the company that you want to be in. Then it should feel kind of right on both sides, and nobody wants to obviously fail. Yeah. I think particularly in hospitality, because everyone is about people. So just kind of having that natural, honest conversation, and just trying to calm your nerves in the sense that, I suppose, taking a bit of a step back. If it's the right job, it's the right job. If it's not the right culture, it's not the end of the world. We've all been there. I've been on interviews where a job seemed amazing, gone in and it's not quite been the right fit, and it can sometimes feel like a failure, but it's not. It's part of the process of finding the right belonging, I guess.
Yeah, I think I love that point, right? So it's kind of confidence is built by preparation, isn't it? And readiness. If you've really thought about it at length and done your research, you will naturally be more confident, which means you can be more natural. No, thanks, Luce. Trudy, final thoughts for candidates?
Prep. Plan everything from your journey, what time you're going to get there, where you're going to park, all those kind of things that stress you out before you get there. Do all those kind of things. Show interest. If you're really interested, show it. Don't be frightened of doing that, because that really does make a difference to a business. Have energy. I know that not everybody's like really hyper, but just make, the way you come across, just have an energy about you, and believe in yourself. If you've got to that stage, they want to see you, they want to hear about you, they want to get to know you, and be brave. Just be brave to ask those questions that really mean a lot to you. And if anybody's got any concerns at the end, is there anything that I need to clarify for you at the end? Just because it's better to do it there where you're in person, you can respond to that, because you know you better than anybody. So you might know what might be a little bit niggly for them. So say is there any concerns, and be brave about that. I think that's really important.
Love it. I love that being brave bit. You can ask, are there any concerns? You can't ask, have I got the job? Right, that's what we learned today. Craig, you want to wrap this one up for us?
Yeah, sure. So I reckon it's opening your eyes wide, not being distracted like a magpie for money or certain benefits, which I guess we've all done at certain points. Doing your research and looking at the experience as a whole thing. We've said that all along. So looking at the whole experience from start to finish in terms of interactions. Like Trudy said, being you, and if you really want it, show it. I think there's so many people let themselves down by energy levels. I think one top tip would be, if you're going for an interview, to arrange the interview or try and arrange the interview if you've got the option, for a time when your energy levels are peak. We're not all morning people, so if your energy levels are better in the afternoon, I don't think so for many people, or first thing in the morning, then arrange it for that time so that but arrive in good headspace, in calm, as you. There's nothing worse than arriving 5 minutes to go and actually walking into the room not feeling like yourself. You're not going to give yourself. So, build that into the journey, and accept if it's not for you, it's not for you. If if a decision is made and the employer comes back, actually understand that for whatever reason it's not for you, and understand that there is something there waiting next.
Yeah, I love it. Brilliant. Well, look, that's nicely brought us to the end of our time together, but hopefully a wealth of information there, I think, actually for candidates and people being interviewed, but also hopefully for line managers who are really thinking, this is a tough time and we need to get people excited about hospitality. How can we bring them into the industry and our businesses in a really supportive way that they know that they're landing in the right place and this is for them. So a massive thanks, Craig, Lewis, kind of co-hosting. Trudy, fabulous to have you here with such relevant current experience at such an exciting brand. Thanks for spending the time with us. It's been great.
No worries.
Cool. So we are back next week one more time. I'm really excited about this one. We're calling it Finding Your Club. And it's really about what mentors, what support, what networks do you need to build, not just for this job search, but throughout your career. So you can always fall back on great advice, great support, and great development. So we're going to be chatting with Lorraine Copes, who's the founder of the Be Inclusive Hospitality Group, really making some waves around mentoring, community, and supporting people who want to get ahead. But that's all next week. For now, a big thank you to Trudy, Craig, Luce, and hopefully that's been useful. You've been joining Otolo's Early Careers session. You can find us all on myotolo.com, where Trudy, Craig, Luce, myself are all mentors, along with 100 other mentors from around the industry. This month it's all about early careers and switching careers, and we're here to help you. So stay safe and see you next week. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.